The topic of cults has fascinated people for many decades, spawning books, podcasts, and in-depth documentaries about these bizarre and scary cults. The most asked question is, why do people join cults? Unfortunately, there's no straightforward answer to that question, and everyone is looking for something different. These cults claim to bring peace and enlightenment to their followers, but in reality, they can bring about chaos and destruction. Number 5. 39-year-old Charles Southern of Chicago, Illinois, was an upstanding member of the community and was known for his work as an English professor at a community junior college. Charles was also the assistant chairman of the English department, and hundreds of students attended Charles's lectures and turned to him for guidance and wisdom. But it wasn't just the students at the community college that were seeking wisdom. In December of 1987, Charles mysteriously disappeared, and his disappearance is believed to be connected to a real-life crazy cult. Charles's family were vaguely aware that he was possibly involved with the cult, conscious development of body, mind, and soul, and in the months before his disappearance, they noticed a bizarre change in him. Little did they know that by Christmas, their lives would be turned into a real-life horror story as they battled for the truth and justice. In late 1987, his family were shocked to see Charles aimlessly wandering the streets of Chicago. Charles was an English professor and assistant chairman. He had a good education and a stable job, so why was he on the streets rambling to himself? His family hospitalized him, and it was here that they realized how much more dangerous the cult really was and how much control they had over his life. As Charles's mother sat at his bedside, 2 members of the group came to visit him and instructed her to leave. The conversation between Charles and the other members has never been disclosed, but it's said that after that, he was discharged days later and returned to normal. He kept to his normal routine of work and group meetings, and it was becoming apparent that Charles was slowly rising through the ranks. In December of 1987, Charles told his family that over Christmas, he would be visiting India and that he would be back in a few weeks. Christmas and New Year's came and went, and there was no sign of Charles. His family let him be, as he said he was away, but in the first week of January, worry began to settle in. Charles's parents visited his house to make sure that all was well, and as they entered the home, they made a shocking discovery. Charles's passport and clothes were still inside the house. There were no entry stamps for India, and it was clear that Charles had never gone on his trip. His parents found 2 notes, one which left everything to Terry Hoffman, the leader of the group, who we'll talk about later, and the second one containing an ominous message reading, "I came under a bad influence, and I was trying to fight it myself." 2 other bizarre cult items were also found in Charles's house, the first being a medication similar to the strong poison, Curair, and Charles's coat, folded inside out on a stool with his hat on top. Experts would later comment that the coat is used in symbolism by a Nigerian tribe to represent that the person has passed away. The cult that Charles was a part of practiced meditation and believed that they were creating a psychic shield around the leader, who was being attacked by unknown forces. It's now widely believed that the group's leader, Terry Hoffman, is responsible for the disappearance of not just Charles, but many others in her group. No sign of Charles has ever been found, and the Chicago police are still baffled by this bizarre cult mystery. Did Charles disappear of his own volition, or is there something much scarier at play here? Charles Southern remains missing, and his family are desperate for answers. Charles is described as an African-American male with black hair, brown eyes, 6'2" and 180 pounds. Charles may have a full beard or some facial hair. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Chicago Police Department at 312-747-6222. Number 4. In 1968, Carlos Castaneda published his book The Teachings of Don Juan, and the book was immediately popular across the world. Thousands of people bought this new book, turning the pages and hoping to absorb the wisdom within. But the book came along with something much more mysterious. As people flipped through the pages of the book, looking at Yaqui indigenous teachings and how plants can heal us, they didn't realize what was about to come. Castaneda's book garnered a cult following, quite literally. While writing his book, Carlos was studying anthropology at UCLA and was beginning to make a reputation for himself. When his book was published, people from around the campus became aware of Carlos, and as his popularity grew, he began to shut himself off from the outside world. He refused to be photographed and never gave interviews. Instead, he confined himself to his base and continued publishing books. But Carlos wasn't alone in his compound. He shared it with keen students of his who were willing to drop everything to learn from him. And over time, this group slowly melded into a cult. All of those who lived with Carlos were young, attractive, and intelligent women, and soon his students became known as his witches. Numerous women moved in and out of the compound, but there was always a tight inner circle of those who were dedicated to Carlos. These women were Regine Thal, Dr. Marianne Simcoe, Dee Alvers, and Amalia Marquez. As the years passed and recruits filtered in through the grounds, these women stayed by Carlos's side, and soon this admiration would turn into an unbelievable, unsolved cult mystery. These 4 women, along with Carlos's other members, were subjected to punishment, ridicule, and emotional manipulation. All of the women in the inner circle hated each other, and Carlos thrived knowing that the women were fighting for him. On April 27, 1998, the enigmatic leader passed away, leaving the inner circle and his other followers in the compound. When authorities were made aware of his passing, and by the time the media had announced it, Regine, Mary Ann, Dee, Amalia, and another follower, Nuri Alexander, had all disappeared. There was no sign of these 5 women, and for years their whereabouts became a mystery. The cult of Carlos Castaneda had finally been dismantled, but now 5 of his followers were missing. It wasn't until 2003 that the strange disappearance of these 5 women would finally be solved. Hikers making their way through the Panamint Dunes in Death Valley found the skeletal remains of a woman. Authorities confirmed that the remains belonged to Nuri Alexander, but they were not able to determine what caused her passing. The other 4 women remain missing, and their families are still looking for answers. Number 3. Terry Hoffman found herself on a dangerous path from enlightenment to a cult leader within a span of a few years. In the 1950s, Terry found herself attracted to New Age teachings and new radical ways of thinking. She explored herself and her spirituality through gurus, meditation, and hypnosis. Soon, Terry became a leader within this niche community, and people began to follow her and hang off of her every word. By the 1960s, this had evolved into the consciousness development of body, mind, and soul. Terry and her followers would never admit to being a cult, but to the outside world, it was clear that Terry was exploiting those below her. Terry sold private classes, telling followers that they could only reach her level if they paid hundreds of dollars to be with her one-on-one. Her plan worked, and people from around the US began flocking to her, hoping to find meaning in life and possibly discover what came after it. Charles Southern, who we also mentioned in this video, is believed to be one of Terry's cult members, and Charles's disappearance is not the only one that's tied to Terry. As time went by, Terry began amping up her teachings and thoughts. She was telling her followers that she was being attacked by Black Lords, and they could save her by forming a psychic barrier around her. Those who protected her would later be afflicted with mental and physical health problems, and the cult had turned extremely dangerous. The only thoughts allowed were those taught and approved by Terry, and critical thinking was not allowed under any circumstances. In February of 1977, Terry's second husband, Glenn Cooley, was found deceased, and there were medications in his system to imply that Glenn had taken his own life. This was the belief for many years, but now investigators believe that the crazy cult leader, Terry, had something to do with this. Glenn had wanted to get divorced and had wanted to leave the group. He was found just 5 days after the divorce had been accepted by the courts. Glenn wouldn't be Terry's only victim, and investigators now believe that Terry may be responsible for the disappearances and passings of Don Hoffman, Charles Southern, Mary Levinson, David and Glenda Goodman, Jill Bounds, Sandy Cleaver, and Devereaux Cleaver. Unfortunately, Terry passed away in 2015, and all the disturbing truths of her cult may never be revealed. All of those who disappeared or passed away had named Terry as their beneficiary, and investigators strongly believe that she is behind it all. It'll take new evidence and testimony to unravel the truth of this bizarre and shocking cult mystery. Number 2. Eric and Pam Ellender were described as popular, friendly, and well-liked within their community of Sulphur, Louisiana. During her high school years, Pam was a cheerleader and was voted the most popular and friendliest, and this showed in her outgoing and happy demeanor. When the couple married, everyone around them was excited, and nobody in the community of Sulphur had a bad word to say about them. They were the average American family by 90s standards, and the two were just living their lives. This all came to a screeching halt on February 12, 1991, when Eric and Pam were found deceased in their home. The two were laid in bed when the attacker came into their home before launching his attack. Luckily, the couple's daughter was left unharmed. Their bodies had been discovered by family members who went to their home after the couple had failed to make contact. The Sulphur police immediately responded to the incident, and soon word spread. It didn't take long for a suspect to be named, and on February 13, 1991, Chris Prudhomme was arrested along with 3 others as he was found to be driving Eric's car. Chris had only been taken in on charges of theft, but as soon as the police began talking to him, he confessed. This wasn't an ordinary confession, and soon the police were confronted with the fact that the crime may have been the product of a bizarre cult. According to reports, Chris was part of a cult named Skaters, or Satan's Kids Against the Establishment. This scary cult had regular meetings and even met the morning after the crime to get their story straight and brief Chris on what to tell the police. There were numerous other individuals involved with the supposed cult, and a private investigator believed that they may have been involved in the crime. 17 days after the Ellenders were discovered, Chris Prudhomme took his own life in his prison cell, leaving behind a note claiming full responsibility for what he did, while also claiming that he acted alone. The private investigator, Huey Littleton, was the one who discovered the Skaters cult, and after talking to the girlfriend of the Skaters members, Huey was convinced that the crime was deeply connected to the cult. 4 years later, Robert Adkins and 2 others were charged in connection with the Ellender crime, and officials now say that the case is closed. For Huey, this case is far from over, and he believes that the Skaters cult is at the center of what happened to Pam and Eric. Number 1. Scientology is one of the most famous cults of all time, and it's heavily prevalent in modern society. To some, Scientology is not a cult, and many people who are in cults don't even realize it before it's too late. Scientology has been the butt of jokes, memes, and even expose documentaries over the years, and despite their strange methods, nobody has ever really been able to get to the heart of the beast. With so much publicity already surrounding Scientology, the press went even crazier when a bizarre mystery occurred from behind the secretive doors of the cult. Shelly Miscavige is a well-known name among Scientologists and within the media. Shelly is the wife of David Miscavige, who's the current leader of Scientology. And in 2007, she mysteriously disappeared from public view. This spawned conspiracy theories, and a missing person report was even filed. Shelly had spent so much time in the limelight that her disappearance was quickly noticed, and to this day we still don't know the truth. Leah Remini, an ex-Scientology member, defected from the church in 2013, and shortly after her escape, she filed a missing person report. According to Leah, Shelly attended her father's funeral in 2007, and then simply disappeared off the face of the earth. Nobody within the church had any answers for her absence, and people began to talk amongst themselves. The media later speculated that Shelly was perhaps being held against her will in one of Scientology's compounds. Shelly had been working on a project at the time of her disappearance, and those who have left the church agreed that those closest to David Miscavige are not immune from his wrath. Shortly after the missing person report was filed, the LAPD made a statement saying that they had spoken to Shelly and that the case was now closed. The LAPD gave no further insight into their meeting and refused to divulge any information at all. Many believe that this vague statement from the LAPD is a sign that Shelly is either being held somewhere or is no longer alive. Is the LAPD covering up a cult mystery, or did Shelly Miscavige simply want to be left alone? Shelly Miscavige's legal team made a statement to the press saying, quote, "This is just harassment. It's a publicity stunt cooked up by a small band of unemployed fanatics who live on the fringe of the internet. Until Shelly comes forward and makes verifiable contact with the media or a trusted source, it's unlikely that we will ever get to the bottom of this disturbing cult mystery." Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.